Good morning, guys, or afternoon, wherever you're at. Today I am going to be discussing a very personal topic to myself, to people I personally have known. Today's video is going to be about depression and suicide. Now, I watched one of my friends, Athena, who I will link her channel below, where she spoke about this. Her family had a loss from someone who committed suicide, and I was thinking about it, and I have told a few friends about this, but I don't talk about it to everybody. So then I was like, well, maybe I should just tell the whole world, or whoever chooses to watch this video. I've suffered from depression since I think 8 would be a good, that was when I really started feeling the symptoms. But I didn't, of course, at 8 know what that was. At 8 years old, my parents got divorced. I thought my world was falling apart. To get a little bit more personal about that, not only did I feel like my world was falling apart, but my parents put me in the middle of who I had to choose. And on top of that, and here's an example. Before my parents got officially divorced, my father was kicked out of the house. My mother was extremely angry and bitter at him. I, to this day, don't know exactly what went on. I do know he tried to cheat on her. I don't know if he actually did. I do know he tried with his secretary. Kind of hope he doesn't watch this, but yeah. There's other things that happened. So, basically, at 8 years old, my parents got divorced. So, okay, one of the most traumatic events in my life at that age, besides losing my parents, essentially, my father came to, I guess he was trying to come in the house or something. My mom ran to all the doors and the windows and she locked them. And he was screaming through the sliding door at me. I was watching over my sister, who was a few weeks old, to open the sliding door in the living room. And my mother and my grandma, my mom's mom, were screaming at me to, "Don't you dare do that! I'll whip your butt!" And he was screaming at me, "Let me in, I just want," and then he said something like, "I just want to see my children," and I don't even remember everything else. It was screaming at the top of their lungs. I was scared. I was crying because my dad kept yelling at me to open the door, and then I kept getting threatened that I was going to get my butt beat, and they weren't idle threats, because I eventually went over and opened the door, and I let him in, and my mom freaked out, and he came in, and they had a huge argument. And when he finally left, it was either my grandma or my mom, I can't remember which one, took me in the bathroom and whipped my ass. Like, that still affects me. How can you spank someone who, like, how can you not see that that would be a issue? You know what I'm saying? Like, you're asking a child to choose between their parents. I didn't have issues with either of my parents at the time. You know, I do now, but then I didn't. And then, you know, after that, I was so depressed. I didn't think it was my fault they broke up. I never thought that. But, I was a pretty outgoing child. For the most part, I didn't have many friends because I lived on a huge acred house area, and I didn't have anybody like that lived near enough to me that I was allowed to go and play with every day. So fast forward to teen years, I was really depressed. Like I said, and I just ate my feelings. I mean, that's when I really started eating, and started this emotional eating issue. And yes, I do know that I should I really should deal with emotions, but I don't know how. I don't know how you deal with that. Like, what steps do you put in place to deal with something like that? I don't know. So then, as a teenager, after my mother and father decided to remarry, yes, after 8 years, after my mother deliberately kept us from my father, like as in if he showed up 15 minutes early and we ran outside to say hi and see him, she would tell us he couldn't take us. And he drove 8 hours to come see us. So, yeah. After all that bullshit, they decided to get remarried. They get remarried, so I'm uprooted from where I lived at, where I had lots of friends, where I felt like I finally fit in. Uprooted, taken. New place. So my depression got really bad, and I felt very alone. The people I thought I was friends with, I've had 2 friends write me for a while, and then it fell off. And I went to visit a few times, and it was fine when I went to visit, but it wasn't the same. And I wasn't really making friends out where I lived at, because I wasn't going to school. I chose to not do that. So then I started a job, and it's eventually where I met my husband. But during this time, I was extremely depressed. My parents fought all the time. So I went elsewhere. After I got my job at Burger King, I started hanging out with people. Like, I didn't want to be home at all. So I hung out with people that were doing stuff. Just anything that I'd get away, anything that would get me out of the house, I was gone. And unfortunately, that meant I was doing things I shouldn't do. And I don't mean drug-wise, so let's not go there. But hooking up with, that's gonna make me sound like a slut. Like, I didn't hook up with everybody, but like, I was doing stuff I shouldn't be doing at that age because there was consequences, and eventually that's how my daughter came to be about, my oldest daughter. And luckily, it wasn't like I was with somebody who I didn't know, he ended up being my husband. But when I got pregnant, he was not my husband. But that's another story for like another time, if I ever choose to tell it. Anyway. But during those time periods, I felt worthless. My worth was down in the freaking hole. And I went home one time. You know what? Here's something I want to tell you. I was raped when I was 17 years old by a man I was on a date with, and I just went home and showered. I never turned him in or anything. And by the way, this guy ended up, I think he's in there, I think he's in prison for murder, for life. So, I don't remember, I read up on it like a long time ago. I don't remember exactly what he did. But I know it has to do with murder. So yeah, go figure. I picked the great ones. But he was younger then. He was in his 20s. I don't. Oh my god. Anyway, so this man raped me on our date. I didn't know how to process that, and I told my now husband at the time. And he was like, well, I don't know what to do about that. He didn't have the reaction I wanted him to have, I guess. I wanted him to be angry for me, with me, I guess, and that didn't happen. And then my mother told me that it was my fault because I opened my legs. Okay. So imagine, I already felt worthless. I already felt unloved. I was trying to find love in the wrong places, and then that happens, and not too long after that, my parents were fighting again, and I don't even remember what it was about, I got screamed at about something, and I was like, I'm done. I went outside, I stormed out the house, and I waited until a semi was coming down the road. And I went to the edge of the sidewalk, and I started to walk in front of that semi. The only thing that stopped me was I was crying so hard I had not heard my brother, who had followed me out. And he pulled me back. I wanted to end it all. And I absolutely believe that my depression, not knowing how to deal with this stuff, and knowing that if I go to a counselor, they'll say the same thing my husband says, because anytime I've ever talked to a counselor, they say the same thing. Or they want to put you on meds. I don't want to cover the problem. But this was when I was 17. And there was other times in my life when I wanted to off myself because I didn't feel loved. And this was after I had 4 kids at that time. I suffered from postpartum depression because I was already depressed, and it got worse. And with my second child, I had a hard time feeling like I could love him, and I felt so horrible for that. Like, how can you not feel the love for your son? But I didn't feel it. Like, now I know that's a symptom of postpartum depression, but I didn't know that, and I tried so hard to connect, and I couldn't. I knew I loved him, but I couldn't feel it like I had with my first. And then all these other things I'm not going to go into, like, so much shit happened, which led us to being where we're at now. Living in a place I told myself I would never live in again. I would never live in a freaking mobile home again, because that's where when my mom left my dad, she sold the house and we had to go live in a trailer. And it was a nice trailer, she fixed it up, but I didn't want to live in a trailer. Like, people have these preconceived notions about people who live in trailers, that they're trailer trash, that they're the lowest of low, they're scum, they're dirt. Yeah, there are people in trailers that are probably like that, but that doesn't make everybody like that. We ended up in a trailer, we lost our house, we were homeless, my marriage is on the rocks, and I have, yesterday I was talking to my husband, and we were talking about, I used to sit down in my chair when I was younger, probably around, I don't even know how young. I would sit in my high chair or my chair, because I did this forever. My parents would fight and they would throw things at each other, and at first I thought it was amusing, and then there was a particular fight that made me afraid, and I remember being scared after that and having what I now understand to be anxiety in my stomach, panic and all that. So anytime my husband and I have a disagreement, I freak out. My emotions skyrocket. I almost can't hear what he's saying. I have massive anxiety, and I have this ridiculous feeling that if we fight, we're going to divorce. And I know that's ridiculous. I know that's not the case. Couples have to have disagreements in order to get where they need to be at. You're not going to agree with your spouse all the time. And unfortunately, I feel like I'm fucked up in the head, excuse my language, but that is what I really feel like. And sometimes when I talk to my husband, and he's been through counseling, and he knows how to talk to someone, it's like, it's so annoying, like, and then I feel ridiculous for overreacting, because I know it's my emotions, I know it's the anxiety in my stomach that's flooding out everywhere, and I can't hear him, I can't even focus on what he's asking me. It's so hard, and I could very, very well lose my marriage if I don't correct this, because he's not going to put up with that forever. And don't think that I'm just like over talking that or whatever. It's true. We talked about it yesterday. Like, I have to figure out how to stop that, or at least lower the anxiety so that I can hear what he's saying, so I can help work on getting us where we need to be at. So I know people with depression tend to, sometimes they end up committing suicide, and I tried. So I'm going to leave a suicide hotline number down below. I'm going to also leave, and this is what got, besides watching my friend Athena's video, it reminded me of a man I used to know who, he had kind of gone through what my husband and I went through, except that we didn't do this. We pushed through. He lost his business. He lost his wife because he lost his business. His car got repoed. His bills were piling up, and he killed himself. He hung himself in a garage, in his garage, and a friend found him. And what made me so angry, because this was terrible. This was somebody I knew, and I had really liked him. And it was not like in a romantic way. He was just a really cool guy. And it was so depressing to me that so many people were just like, oh, well, you know, he was a coward for killing himself. Or he was a pussy, or whatever. Like, there were so many people that were so rude about it. And I was like, what is wrong with you fucking people? Have you never been to I mean, yeah, most of us don't off ourselves, but to go to that point means you were so far gone. He needed help. And everybody stopped, like, everybody left him. There was a day where I was at one of my lowest points in life, besides the truck, where all day I was thinking of taking, let's just say I really thought about offing myself, and I ended up, this was in my early 20s, and I ended up calling my mom on a payphone because I'd had to shut my phone off because I couldn't pay the bill anymore. And I called my mom, and I was screaming on the phone. My husband, oh my god, it was a horrible time. And even having my children, it wasn't enough. And that's shameful. I feel shameful for saying that. It was the one day in my life where I didn't want to go on. I didn't want to be there. I felt like my parents would be there, my mom at least would be there for them, and they would have a better life without me. But I didn't do it because after yelling and screaming and crying on the phone with my mom, probably like an hour, I'm pretty sure it was an hour, I changed my mind. But I was in a bad spot, guys. Anyway, if you are suffering from depression and you are having suicidal thoughts, call that number below. They also have a chat line if you want to go online. I do believe it's suicidehotline.com or something like that, but I will post it below. Or just talk to me if you need to. You know, I don't have those thoughts anymore. I have worked through enough of it, but it does still hit me kind of emotionally, so obviously I still need to deal with it. But if you want someone to talk to, someone who's been there, who's been at the deepest, lowest they could be, and nothing mattered because you didn't think you mattered enough, then, you know, message me or something. But anyway, I'm going to leave you with, now that I've talked for 19 minutes, I bet none of you are even here. I'm going to leave you with the words, and I'm going to post this song below because it really hit me hard after watching Athena's video. Here are the words. You've carried on so long you couldn't stop if you tried it. You've built your wall so high that no one could climb it. Would you let me see beneath your beautiful? Would you let me see beneath your perfect? Take it off now, girl. Take it off now, girl. And I don't do very well talking poetry, obviously. I want to see inside. Would you let me? Would you let me? And I was bawling to that song, especially when that started playing over and over. It's by Labrinth featuring Emeli, Sandé. It's called Beneath Your Beautiful. And if you don't want to go below, the suicide prevention hotline is 1-800-273-8255. You guys, it's so important to understand your self-worth, to push past through those struggles, and to deal with them, hopefully. So, hashtag team love yourself.